God of War gameplay with Devil May Cry combos with vampires in the old American frontier in this economy? Bold, but cool. Sup everybody, Ambro here, and despite my amazingly hilarious opener, Evil West was developed by Flying Wild Hog, a Polish studio, and released back in 2022 for the PS5, Xbox Series consoles, and PC via Steam, and goes for about $49.99 US, although I've seen keys on CD keys for under $15, so do with that as you will. It does run very well on Steam Deck as well, as you will see some footage here in this video. I was financially sound enough to purchase this game on launch, and was very, very happy with it. I think given the current gaming landscape, this game would have launched to much higher acclaim and popularity, especially with its price tag. Although, I have to say this is more of a cult classic type of game, but I'm here for it. Just a quick reminder of what kind of channel this is for potential newcomers. I love to chat about games. I've always appreciated games as art because that's exactly what they are. And sometimes I want to continue to showcase games that are out of the limelight, either due to time or just not standing out enough amongst this flooded landscape. I like to showcase games that are also playable on devices like the Steam Deck and lower end devices as my focus because the current gaming and economic landscape is making gaming less and less accessible. So whatever I can do to help you find those games, I will. Discoverability on modern platforms sucks. Of course, I'm going to cover AAA games from time to time, but my primary focus is discoverability for games that I find interesting. And whatever saves my wife from having to hear me chew her ear off about the 8th installment in a franchise she's never heard of. So, before we get started, please remember to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to get allegedly instant notifications on when the next video drops. We are so close to that magic 1,000 number, and every bit of support at this stage is super appreciated. So, Evil West, what the hell is it, and do you even remember if you've heard of it? To put it as plainly and quickly as possible, Evil West is like that 80s action movie that totally didn't get a big budget, but you still love it anyway. It's like Reservoir Dogs from Quentin Tarantino, or Evil Dead from Sam Raimi, you know? It's not a full-on, like, solo indie dev thing, because honestly, Flying Wild Hog is a decent-sized studio, but that's exactly the type of vibe that this game gives off. It's rough around the edges, but it's honestly still great. Evil West is a third-person action melee shooter set in the American frontier. You play as Jesse Rentier, a vampire hunter and son to director William Rentier, who is the science and numbers-driven dad and head of the government agency that is designated with protecting the best interests of the citizens of the United States and the United States government from the likes of the supernatural. Vampires, werewolves, and these gross things, and more. The Rentier Institute has been looking for ways to combat the Sanguisuge vampires and their ability to hide things from humans through the use of invisible barriers called glamours or glamours. The plot starts out with vampires actually debating amongst themselves if they should strike at humanity before humans become too powerful, and can find a way past these illusions that protect the remaining dying race of vampires. It's such a cool and perfect premise for a game, honestly, and the inspiration is also clear. I really like when developers make their games with a strong sense of conviction and belief in their end goal. The story and setup for the game setting is perfect, and the combat and combo system was directly inspired by the Devil May Cry franchise, while the over-the-shoulder camera perspective and general combat was heavily influenced by God of War 2018. Now, if you remember God of War Ragnarok, Evil West was actually catching strays from hardcore toxic PS fanboys because, quote-unquote, it looks like Teemu God of War. Okay, first, look of all that's objectively hilarious. I don't often engage in fanboy circles because who has the time to be a professional hater? But this point was hilarious because no one should be comparing one of the largest developers for PlayStation with endless resources to a AA third-party dev who created a good game on a fraction of the budget with little to no brand recognition. And the thing is, back in 2002, Evil West generally received good reception. If you're the kind of person that cares about rating systems, the game landed between 7 and 9s across the board. It's a good game. And it's a handsome one artistically and graphically, I'd say. It was developed on Unreal Engine 4, and despite that engine's historical shortcomings, since Evil West isn't pushing for an open world, it works really well for this game. In fact, the game runs so well on the Steam Deck, and I think that's a huge plus for it, in my opinion. From a tech standpoint, I believe the game ships with 2 modes for console owners, a 1080p 60 FPS performance mode, and a 4K 30 FPS mode, which is pretty standard for games this generation. However, the footage from this video is almost all from my PC at max settings or some off-screen Steam Deck footage at medium settings across the board. Now, the reason I'm saying all of this is meant to temper your expectations of the game because it is clunky, or janky, or whatever you want to call it. You can feel it as you play the game, but it doesn't take away from the otherwise great fun and good presentation. The cutscenes in particular are standout and look incredible. And I want to talk more about the cutscenes in a bit, but I do want to give you more than conjecture about the game as a whole, so you can actually understand what it's about and how it flows as an experience. The game is broken up into 16 distinct missions with their own puzzles, locations, boss battles, and occasional new enemy type. You get those really amazing cutscenes in between missions, which I actually feel is the glue that helps pull the game's story, lore, and characters together. These cutscenes are so good, actually, that the difference in quality between what's in-game and what's pre-rendered is really noticeable. Like, the jank in some of the animations, getting stuck on geometry, some of the finishers, and the puzzles, they all work, but they don't always look super smooth. And these are all things that generally break immersion for players to varying degrees. And when I say break immersion, I mean like you thought about it for 2 whole seconds and then remembered that you're playing a game, took an audible breath, ate another Cheeto or sour cream and onion Lay's Ruffle Chip, and then went back to enjoying said game. The story itself, again, is predictable and very like 80s action movie coded. Like, you've seen this movie before. You know exactly how it ends, but you watch it every time it comes on TV because it's comfortable. Now, I know I sound crazy complaining about how high quality the cutscenes are next to the quality of the actual playable parts of the game, but it's true. I felt the same way playing the recent Mafia: The Old Country. One thing about the cutscenes that is a bit jarring is that they are presented at 30 FPS with some macro blocking artifacts, which can be noticeable when the game jumps from these gameplay scenes to those pre-recorded cutscenes. Now, as Jesse, you'll be drip-fed with new abilities and combos as you progress through the game at a very steady clip. Evil West never stops making you feel like a badass through your abilities, and Jesse himself, who is voiced and portrayed by Garrick Hagan, who did a really great job and did a good interview with Gaming Madness, which I'll link in the description below. You should check it out, it's really cool. But Jesse is your run-of-the-mill, like, tough American cowboy who wants to remain a field agent and not stuck behind a desk being a pencil pusher, which I totally get it. Completely understandable. However, his father William has aspirations for his son Jesse to take over the Rentier Institute. This tried and true trope about father setting up his son to succeed him in the family business wouldn't be so boring if, well, Jesse wasn't so boring. He's just so one-dimensional and unmemorable. He's basically stand-in tough guy A, which is a shame because his abilities, fighting style, and gauntlet all give him the aura of a comic book character. Again, his voice actor did a great job, but it just seems like the writers didn't want to take any chances with their tough guy protagonist. It's disappointing, but it's not a deal breaker. You will battle with all sorts of supernatural beings, and while vampires are the beasts that are promoted closely with the game, you'll fight everything from corroded mold, creature things, to full-on werewolves, and of course, many variants of the Sanguisuge vampires. The other characters are much more personable, if not predictable character tropes. I mean, really, coming back to this game all this time after launch, as I got slowly reintroduced to the characters, I remembered their personalities and how their individual unique charm always shined through over Jesse. You've got the nerdy, polite science guy, the old grizzled vet, the occasional voice of reason, and the antagonist amongst the group. And then there's Jesse, just as dull of a bag of rocks. He just shows, like, no emotion. He's quick with a quip here or there and can definitely do his job well, but man, there is just nothing to latch onto here that feels relatable. He's more stilted and dull than Master Chief from Halo, who probably says less words across 3 games than Jesse does in this entire one game. At least the lore in this game is genuinely cool as well, with how readable and well presented the UI is in the game. Some of the collectibles are fully voice-acted audio logs, and I found myself listening to them. Despite the quality of some aspects of the rest of the game, the lore building and attention to detail that went into making Evil West's supernatural frontier setting feel well realized is something that needs to be praised, so kudos to Flying Wild Hog for that. Now let's chat about the combat and how the inspiration for the combat for Evil West stems from both DMC and God of War 2018. I mentioned earlier, but the inspirations are pretty clear. I actually started a new game for the purpose of recording this video, but I did beat the game back on launch. I was originally going to just record footage from my New Game Plus run of the game, but I had so many abilities and combos that I literally forgot how to use them all. And I don't view this as a bad thing. Games and their systems should be unique like this. The over-homogenization of games and system design is a net detriment to the industry in my honest opinion. Now, the combat in Evil West is definitely the main draw of the game, in my opinion. It's satisfying and punchy and janky in all the right ways. I love the different finishers and how each enemy also has a clear weakness to exploit. It feels like an ongoing game of rock, paper, scissors where you constantly have to be mixing up the combos you're using. Sometimes I find myself just reacting, like purely out of reaction, and do a combo that I didn't even mean to do. It's such a deep combo system. Like, honestly, I think I mentioned it before, but there are so many moves and abilities that you accumulate as you play, and I think that's actually what makes it so genius. There's clearly specific ways for dealing with each weakness on the enemy. Like these flying bug enemies, for example, take the most damage from a Rentier rifle hitting them on their weak spot at the right moment. But I'm not forbidden from attacking the enemy with other attacks, like the Zapper Pull. It's just they won't do as much damage, or it might not be effective, or the right micro decision at that point in the combat. And when there's this many enemies on screen and the hit or miss over the shoulder camera view gets in the way, sometimes you just react naturally. You can definitely see the jank during the combat though, especially with the clipping and finisher animations, which do not allow you to take damage until the animation is complete, although this was probably play-tested and consciously decided on. And to be fair, there is a skill you can unlock early on for when you heal yourself. You gain like 6 seconds of invincibility, and a lot of the animations can actually be used strategically if you time it all right, as you can avoid big hits from enemies. The placement of helpful, interactable, damage-dealing environmental objects also helps in these encounters because you're constantly funneled into these small arenas. In fact, you'll need these items to help thin out mobs because it is easy to get overwhelmed without using these things. There's these spike coffin things, these crates of TNT lying around in deserted caves for video game reasons. And on top of that, your array of weapons is super cool. You get your pistol, your Rentier rifle, as I mentioned before, the gauntlet, the zapper, the shotgun, this blinding thing, and more abilities as the game goes on. I do like that the game rewards you for paying attention to how each of the systems affect different enemy types and their weaknesses. I actually can't remember a combat system this memorable in recent years for, like, any action game. Like, genuinely, this combo system is so well done, I'm walking away from this review wishing other third-person action melee game developers would go this deep and well thought out when creating their next combat systems. I'm just gonna say it, okay? I enjoyed the Evil West combat system more than God of War 2018 and Ragnarok by extension. There, I said it, okay? It's just more enjoyable with a more fleshed out combo system. No, the animations and general level of detail are not up to the same level as Sony Santa Monica's magnum opus because of course it's not. That's a ridiculous comparison. Kratos, however, is a far more memorable character than what's his name again? I don't know, some gruff, tough-looking generic white guy. Anyway, what doesn't compare to God of War is the upgrade system. Again, this is a much shorter game with a much more narrow scope, so keep that in mind as I make these absurd comparisons. With that, you'll only get like maybe 10 to 12 hours of this game on one playthrough, which is in no small part to the sometimes overly simplistic level design. As you do traverse through the levels, you'll scrounge around for bucks and pickups, which you can then use to upgrade your abilities and combo extenders. Now, searching the levels for bucks is not particularly difficult because the levels are so narrow and give you basically nowhere else to go. So when I say the levels are simple, I mean it's like almost on rails in terms of guiding the player what direction to go down. It's super reined in. Like, you'll maybe be given 2 paths to choose down. One will lead you to a dead end with a buck's chest, and then the other is just the path forward. Like, that's it. You can see the very clear reined in level design, and that's probably done to keep the game focused on what it does best, which is the combat after all. And despite my tone on this section, this decision to keep the scope manageable is something that I do praise because not enough game devs and project managers do this in general, but I digress. This is not to say the game is, like, too simple or devoid of small details. One small detail I noticed during combat is that certain enemies will visibly show damage as you attack them. At the start of a combat encounter, the model will start out looking pristine, and then as their health dwindles, you can see chunks of their body missing, exposing the bones and muscle tissue underneath. It's actually a really nice touch. And like I said, this is a handsome game, and you'll see the devs' hard work pay off here. Do not underestimate Evil West when it comes to its artistic execution because it's quite stunning at times. And you're brought to of many varied locations. You have areas in the sun, in the snow, in the caves, in the swamps, and a whole lot more. One last thing about the combat, the boss battles in particular are standout and can actually get really challenging even on the normal difficulty, which I was not expecting. And I'm not mad about either. I like a good challenge in my games. These battles all have their own unique flow and abilities that you have to utilize in order to overcome these milestone monsters. The reason I bring up the thing about challenge and difficulties is because I noticed that there's a general trend among aging gamers that a lot of people tend to play in easier and easier difficulties as they get older, which to be clear is 100% fine. I have no problem with what other people do with video games that they paid for. End of statement. Right? We listen and we don't judge. And with that being said, okay, I didn't know this game had co-op. I don't know if this feature was even available at launch, so maybe my confusion is understandable, but this is a great feature to have, especially today. With the success of games like It Takes Two and Split Fiction, and the relatively recent release of a co-op game like Gears Reloaded, I think that this would make Evil West stand out if it were released today. I don't think I'm alone on that thought. So, in the end, Evil West is a good but not great game that I think would be viewed much more favorably by the general gaming public and critics alike if it were released tomorrow at its $49.99 US price tag. Its combat system is a standout, as is the quality of the cutscenes and lore building. It's a very fun game, and if melee combat is your jam, you will not regret picking up this game. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell to get allegedly instant notifications on when the next video drops. And comment down below, what are your thoughts on Evil West? Were you one of the people who played the game on launch, or did you miss this one too? How do you feel about really narrow, linear games like this? Do they tickle your fancy? Let's chat. If you want to get in touch with me directly, reach out on Blue Sky. And as always, this is Ambro, keeping you plugged into the games that matter. Peace out.